This is the weekly roundup on EAC News Channel. You look back at the past week in the Kingdom of Wonder, a very good evening. I'm Anthony Ellis and we start with Monday. Prime Minister Hun Sen has stated that the leaders from the ASEAN countries and United States have not agreed in the current arrangement plans made for the upcoming special ASEAN-US summit to be held in the United States at the end of the month. The Prime Minister made this remark while speaking at the inauguration ceremony of the Cambodia-China Tabong Kamum Friendship Hospital on Monday morning. EAC News reporter Dekaning has more.
Prime Minister Hun Sen has said that if the date for the special ASEAN-US summit is not agreed upon in time, it will likely be postponed. He explained that many ASEAN leaders have asked for the meeting to be held on the 26th and 27th of March, but the US, along with 3 ASEAN leaders, have said that this proposed date did not work for them. The Prime Minister also continued that since there are differing views on when the summit should be held, he recommends postponing it and also proposes holding the summit sometime between March 28th and April 7th. He added that he will not be able to go abroad from mid-May to mid-June because that is when Cambodia will be holding elections and therefore he will need to stay in the country. The White House announced on the 28th of February 2022 that a special summit between ASEAN and the United States will be held at the end of March. However, ASEAN member states have not yet confirmed their participation or put a disagreement on the set dates. Nekanin, EAC News.
Prime Minister Hun Sen has warned Cambodian people not to try to be soldiers on the Ukraine territory as entering the war between Russia and Ukraine will only add fuel to flames and further contribute to turmoil of the war. He made this statement while speaking at the inauguration ceremony of the Cambodian-China Tabong Kamum Friendship Hospital on Monday morning. EAC News reporter Dashana Gudgeon has more details.
Prime Minister Hun Sen has announced that he would not allow the Cambodian people to go and fight in the Russia-Ukraine war. He added that in the past, even when sending Cambodian Blue Helmet troops under the United Nations umbrella to undergo peacekeeping operations in other countries, he would not be able to sleep while fearing for the lives and safety of the Cambodian people. On 27 February, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the creation of the International Legion of Territorial Defense of Ukraine, which would allow willing foreigners to join the fight against Russia on Ukrainian territory. Some European countries have allowed their citizens to go to war. 12 days have now passed since Russia launched a major offensive against Ukraine on 24th February. Russian President Vladimir Putin has justified this action by saying there was an urgent need for Russia to launch a military operation to demilitarize Ukraine in order to protect the Donbas Republic and to ensure that Russia will not be under NATO threat from Ukrainian territory. More than 1.5 million Ukrainians have so far fled the country and crossed borders to seek refuge in neighboring countries. The UNHCR has warned that the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine is just beginning. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The Cambodian-China Friendship Hospital in Tabong Khmum province was officially inaugurated on Monday morning by Prime Minister Hun Sen after more than 32 months of construction. The hospital's construction with the help of the grant for more than $50 million from the People's Republic of China and is one of the largest and most advanced general hospitals in Tabong Khmum province. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has the details.
Located in Nikom Le Village, Stralok Commune, Tabong Khmum District in Tabong Khmum Province, the Cambodia-China Friendship Hospital has an emergency ward, a medical ward, an outpatient ward, an infectious disease ward, a supply ward, an electrical ward, and a morgue. This large hospital also has 25 consultation rooms, an imaging center to conduct procedures such as MRIs, CT scans, and gastroenterology tests, 6 operating rooms, 10 ICU rooms, and 300 beds for patients. The Minister of Health, Mam Bon Heng, spoke at the inauguration ceremony on Monday morning that this hospital is the second major construction project executed in Cambodia with a grant from the Chinese government, the first being the Cambodia-China Friendship Praskosamat Hospital. He added that this new achievement is an invaluable and precious bond that emerges from the friendship, cooperation, and comprehensive strategic partnership between the Royal Government of Cambodia and the Government of the People's Republic of China that is as strong as steel. This achievement was made for the people of Tabong Khmum and other northeastern provinces, which contribute significantly to the Royal Government's policy on universal health services, especially for the marginalized and minorities, ensuring no one is left without access to health care. The hospital's inauguration ceremony was attended by government officials, doctors, and members of the general public, with a total of about 700 people in attendance at the hospital site. Speaking with some of the attendees, they expressed happiness in receiving this new hospital as it will alleviate the hardships of traveling to faraway hospitals to receive medical care. The deputy chief of Plang Village in Stralok Commune, Tabong Khmum District, Mau Kok, said that the establishment of an operational hospital in the province makes people happy because there's no need to travel far away to receive health services.
In the past, it was difficult. We had to travel very far when someone was ill. We have to go to Phnom Penh or Kampong Cham, but now our province has a kind of hospital, like Mudamakuri. It's so close, like say Karachi. Having a good doctor nearby makes things so much easier. It helps a lot from the travelling to extra expenses. We are close to the hospital now, so it is not hard. We stay close, everything is close. Travelling by road is easy, not difficult.
67-year-old Sansaray, a resident of Pim Romit village, also in Stralop Commune, said that when he was sick before, he would have to go all the way to Phnom Penh or even Vietnam to receive treatment.
We have to spend a lot. Everything was difficult, including the road, and it was very far. Very difficult for the family members who would follow to take care of me. It was difficult, but when now that the hospital is closed, I'm happy. Thank you for helping us have a hospital so close by.
The hospital began construction on the 1st of March 2019 and was completed on the 27th of October 2021 with a total of 8 buildings and 5 floors with a height of 24 meters in Nikom Le Village, Stralok Commune, Tabong Khmum District, Tabong Khmum Province. Additionally, the building covers an area of 55,814 square meters within a total area of 75,570 square meters. Speaking at the inauguration ceremony, Prime Minister Hun Sen stated that the Tabong Khmum Cambodia-China Friendship Hospital is the largest and most capable hospital compared to other provinces, and will not only serve the people of Tabong Khmum Province, but also those living in neighboring provinces as well. He thanked the People's Republic of China for the help provided to build this hospital. The Prime Minister also called on doctors to continue being conscientious and professional, to have good morals and a good attitude towards patients. He continued that in the context of COVID-19, people have dubbed doctors and frontline workers as the White Army, so he hopes that they will continue to keep this name in mind while doing their work. Dekanin, EAC News.
The Chinese ambassador to Cambodia, Wang Wentin, has said that China has always stand with Cambodia in fight against COVID-19, saying that China will continue to provide assistance to Cambodia to overcome the global pandemic. He made this statement while speaking in the inauguration ceremony of the Cambodia-China Friendship Hospital in Tabong Kamon on Monday morning. EAC News reporter Dashana Guchen has more.
The Chinese ambassador stated that in a few days, China will begin sending teams of doctors abroad, and the first team is set to come to Cambodia. He added that he is confident that Cambodia will overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, saying that as long as China and Cambodia join hands, there are no difficulties that both countries cannot overcome. He further congratulated Cambodia for the achievement of the new hospital in Tabong Kamon province, which will contribute to improving the well-being of people in the northeast of the country. The hospital was built with a $50 million grant from the Chinese government and was completed in late 2021. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
US Ambassador of the United Nations on Sunday, March the 6th, has said that US troops would not be on the ground or in the air in Ukraine in the wake of the Russian invasion.
The remarks by the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, were in response to Kiev's appeals to the West to toughen sanctions beyond existing efforts. It also requested more weapons, including a plea for Russian-made planes to help it repel Russian forces. Greenfield has added that doing so would escalate this war and make this an American war against the Russians.
George, President Biden has been very, very clear that American troops will not be put on the ground or in the air to escalate this war and make this an American war against the Russians. But we've also been very clear that we will support Ukraine in every other way possible. We have provided them over $1 billion in support over the course of the past few days. Billions prior to that. We're providing them training. We're working with our allies and the frontline countries, the border countries, to support their efforts as well.
We've also been very clear that we will support Ukraine in every other way possible. We have provided them over $1 billion in support over the course of the past few days, Thomas Greenfield has also said. The West, which calls Putin's reasons for invading baseless, has expanded efforts to rearm Ukraine, sending in items from Stinger missiles to anti-tank weapons. But Washington and its NATO allies have resisted Ukraine's appeals for a no-fly zone for fear that it would escalate the conflict beyond Ukraine's borders. It's not just some rule you pass that, it's the willingness to shoot down the aircraft of the Russian Federation, which is basically the beginning of World War III, Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio has said.
United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken says what Ukrainians are doing is inspiring the world, and the world is united in support of Ukraine against Russia's aggression.
United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken has talked to refugees from Ukraine in Korzowa, Poland on Saturday, March 5. At the refugee camp, Blinken has listened to several refugees who spoke about the situation in Ukraine. Blinken has said that what Ukrainians were doing was inspiring the world, and the world is united in support of Ukraine and against Russian aggressions. He has also thanked helpers for their support. U.S. helpers are serving about 30,000 meals across all the border points every day. More than 1 million people have fled Ukraine following Russia's invasion of the country on February 24. Poland, whose Ukrainian community of around 1 million is the region's largest, has accepted nearly 800,000 Ukrainian refugees, Polish Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs Powell Zipernakwer has told reporters. The number of refugees has risen to 1.5 million on Sunday night from 1.3 million, the UN Refugee Agency chief has said. Women and children, often numbed with exhaustion, have continued to pour into Poland and other neighboring countries, as well as into western Ukrainian cities such as Kyiv. As United Nations monitoring mission has said, at least 351 civilians had been confirmed killed and 707 injured in Ukraine so far since the start of the invasion on February 24, adding that the real figures were likely to be considerably higher.
An airport in central Ukraine was completely destroyed by 8 Russian missiles. The Ukrainian president has confirmed an address as he urged the West to send more aircraft. It happened as Zelensky's repeat urgent plea for West to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine to stop the Russian combat aircraft and all its terrorists.
Мені доповіли про ракетний удар по Вінниці.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said Russian rockets have completely destroyed the civilian airport of the central western region, capital of Vinnytsia, on Sunday, March 6th. Earlier, the authorities reported emergency services were working to put out fires at the airport caused by the rocket strikes. The Ukrainian president was quoted saying, "If you don't give us at least planes so we can protect ourselves, there's only one thing to conclude. You want us to be killed very slowly." The barraged airport is roughly a 4-hour drive away from Kyiv, according to Google Maps. European Union leader Charles Michel has said closing Ukraine's airspace could spark a world war. Zelensky has repeatedly called on NATO countries to stop the Russian onslaught on his country by imposing a no-fly zone. Western leaders have so far refused for fear of triggering a wider war in Europe. Deploying fighter jets over Ukraine could, in current circumstances, be considered as NATO's entry into the war and therefore risk World War III, Mr. Michel made clear in an interview. Mr. Michel has denied that economic sanctions against Russia constitute a war of the European Union or NATO against Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has linked the West's economic punishment for his invasion of Ukraine to declaring war on Moscow. Mr. Michel has said European and American allies impose sanctions to create pressure and hurt the Russian regime, not the people. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky's wife has pleaded the media to tell the terrible truth about Putin's troops killing children consciously and cynically. Olena Zelensky has said Russians had been killing Ukrainian children since Putin's forces invaded on February 24th.
And finally, in this tiring time, members of the Ukraine Territorial Defence Unit, Liza Ivanchenko and Valery Filmov, decided to seize the day and get married in Kiev checkpoint. With a veil and an army chaplain, the wedding ceremony was a success.
There was no stopping Ivashenko and Filimonov, who decided to affirm their love despite these trying times. Wearing military uniforms, the bride and groom walked down towards the army chaplain, brimming with joy. They exchanged their vows and rings. Lazia said there is no telling on what will happen tomorrow. They must live in the moment and keep hope for a better future. The bride and groom had not planned to wed, although they have been together for 20 years and have raised an 18-year-old daughter together. But the war put things in perspective for them, and the wedding helped lift their spirits. The wedding was attended by members of Ukraine's Territorial Defense Unit who held white roses.
You know what? I want to give the present for everyone, but the present for every Ukrainian to finish the war. It's every Ukrainian have just one goal: to stop the war, to stop the killed civilian people, women. It's huge hope for everyone, not just in Ukraine.
Since Moscow launched the invasion on Ukraine on 24th of February, the civilian death toll has now climbed to 364, including more than 20 children, according to a March 6th United Nations report.
The Cambodian Minister for Foreign Affairs and appointed ASEAN Special Envoy for Myanmar, Deputy Prime Minister Prak Sokhonn, met with the Japanese Special Envoy for the National Reconciliation in Myanmar and the Chairman of Nippon Foundation, Yohei Sasakawa, on Tuesday morning to discuss matters related to the ongoing Myanmar crisis. According to the post made by the Deputy Prime Minister Prak Sokhonn on official Facebook page, the Cambodian Foreign Minister and the Japanese Special Envoy discussed how the implementation of the ASEAN 5-point consensus has been slower than expected. However, both sides remain hopeful that the ASEAN Special Envoy
upcoming visit to Myanmar will help create a more conducive environment and peaceful dialogue between all parties and return Myanmar back to normalcy. Deputy Prime Minister Prak Sokhonn added that he believes that Mr. Saskawa's vast expertise in Myanmar's would be assessed which contribute greatly to the common cause. As the Asian Special Envoy, the Cambodian Foreign Minister will be headed to Myanmar from the 20th to 23rd of March, where he will meet with different stakeholder groups involved with the ongoing Myanmar conflict, including representatives of the Myanmar military and opposition groups. During his visit, he will allow the distribution of humanitarian aid and local hospitals.
The Cambodian Minister of Information has received an honorary doctorate from the Ramjamgala University of Technology, Paranakhon in Thailand. The honorary document conference ceremony was held under the presidency of Her Royal Highness Princess Maha Jakari Sinarodom at the RMUTP in Bangkok on Tuesday. EAC News reporter Decca Nin has the story.
This honorary doctorate was awarded to Minister Khieu Kanyaret in recognition of his contribution to the work of Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen in serving Cambodia and bringing about peace, national unity, and political stability, especially through the use of media. The leadership of the Information Minister has enabled effective utilization of social media for the best interests of the people and society. Acknowledging the contribution of his colleagues, Minister Khieu Kanyaret thanked the Thai University for the honorary doctorate, stressing that it represents a strong friendship between Cambodia and Thailand. Dekanin, EAC News.
The Ministry of National Defence Deputy Prime Minister Ban has urged the Siem Reap provincial authorities to manage the natural resources and the Forest Conventions area collective with other relevant militaries, institutions and local authorities in order to resolve ongoing land enchantments issues more quickly. The Cambodian Defence Minister made these remarks during the closing ceremony of the meeting to summarise the work results of 2021 and the work direction of 2022 of the Siem Reap Provincial Administration Tuesday morning. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has more details.
Deputy Prime Minister Ban has stated that in order to ensure the effectiveness of the work to manage natural resources and forest conservation areas, the provincial administration, municipal administration, district administration, and commune administration must together ensure the proper implementation of the principles and measures set by the relevant ministries and institutions. He stated that as the chairman of the Provincial State Land Management Commission, he urges the provincial administration to cooperate with other ministries and institutions in defining border posts and registering land to prevent illegal encroachment on state-owned land areas and forests in protected areas. He stressed that the state must expedite the settlement of land disputes as soon as possible to avoid them spreading and becoming more complicated and difficult to resolve. He advised that in resolving land disputes and local protests, efforts must be made to avoid all forms of violence, and the monitoring and control of encroachment on people's land in protected areas and forests must be increased to prevent any further illegal intrusions. Deputy Prime Minister Ban also recommended to village and commune authorities not to sign documents of sale, transfer, or ownership, any documents of illegal land tenure in protected areas, and to continue to educate, guide, and disseminate information on forest law, fishery laws, and laws on protected areas to local authorities, citizens, and stakeholders so that they can more actively participate in the protection of forests and natural resources. He stated that the forest in Phnom Kulen area in particular must be protected because it is an important source of water supply for Siem Reap province. Dekanin, EAC News.
Tuesday, 8th of March marked International Women's Day, and Olympia Mall in Phnom Penh celebrated women by holding an event raised awareness on the daily challenges and the bias faced women. The event held under the theme Break the Bias and featured prominent speakers from various industries. EAC News attended an event and some insight of the importance of this day to learn what breaking the bias will entail. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin will tell you more about it.
Jia Sok Hie, the CEO of the Olympia Mall, created this event in hopes of breaking the bias against women and unlocking the potential that women have. She said that she hopes by bringing women leaders from various industries to speak at the event, attendees will be inspired by their different perspectives and understand the need for greater support for women's success. The event began with registration and the playing of the national anthem before the first key speakers took the stage. The first panel was moderated by Sampor Sai and featured Kong Sorita, the Undersecretary of State from the Ministry of Women's Affairs, Ron Saray Lakana, Deputy Secretary General of Anti-Human Trafficking and Juvenile Justice, Oknya Kao Mom, the President of CWEA and CEO of Lily Food Industry, and Jia Rotha, the CEO and founder of Khmom Technology. Undersecretary of State Kong Sorita stated that she wanted the next generation of girls to be their own heroes. Thus, she joined the Ministry of Women's Affairs to create the change that she wanted to see. For Saray Lakana, she did not let society discourage her from joining the police force. She talked about how many had wanted to see her fail, but she pushed through and was still able to raise 3 children while pursuing her career. Mom talked about the expectations held for women to be able to do everything and said that as a single mother, she did do it all by raising a family and being the head of multiple projects. She added that the only reason she could do it was because of love for her family and love for her work. She encouraged all attendees to do what they love because only then will they be able to weather through the hardships. Before she talked about her experience, Rotha asked the audience to stand up and close their eyes. She asked them to picture a programmer and asked if they saw a face like hers. She said that during her studies, she was one of the few women in her program. She ultimately saw that she needed to be self-sufficient to climb the ladder of success. Thus, she encouraged all women in the audience to be active in their journey to reach wherever they wanted to be. A second panel was moderated by Miss Jane and featured Sarun Lakana, the country manager of Chi Investments, Tan Sray Pau, the owner of Agro Agape Coffee, Yu Buray, the founder and CEO of Talent Excellence Development Partner, and DJ Avida. The panel discussed the challenges of breaking habits that keep women from being successful. The main message of the discussion was that women do not need to adhere to stereotypes or traditional understandings of what it means to be a woman. Davina Jia, a student and model who attended the event, said that the key speakers inspired her to be herself and do what she loves. Another student attendee, Samnang, said that he attended the event to see what the International Women's Day celebration at Olympia Mall would be like. He said that he learned that one needs to be brave to pursue one's dream, as well as the need to respect women as equals in order to improve society. After each panel discussion concluded, CIM models walked the runway for a short fashion show supported by Converse, Beliza, the pizza company Cambodia, Madame Boutique Ami, Fly Coffee, and the Olympia Mall. The evening concluded with a live performance from singer Prima and DJ Avida from Pong Studio. Dekanin, EAC News.
US President Joe Biden has announced a ban on Russian oil and other energy imports on Tuesday, March the 8th, in relation to the invasion of Ukraine, underscoring strong bipartisan support for move, and he has acknowledged it will drive US energy prices.
Oil prices jumped on the news, with benchmark Brent crude for May climbing by 5.4% to $129.91 a barrel. President Biden has been working with allies in Europe, who are far more dependent on Russian oil, to isolate Russia's energy-heavy economy and Putin. Britain's announced shortly before Biden's remarks that it would phase out the import of Russian oil and oil products by the end of 2022. The U.S. president has said sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies had already caused the Russian economy to crater. He has also said the latest moves had been made in close consultation with allies and partners around the world.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. This is a move that has strong bipartisan support in Congress and, I believe, in the country. Americans have rallied to support the Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war. We made this decision in close consultation with our allies and our partners around the world, particularly in Europe, because a united response to Putin's aggression has been my overriding focus, to keep all NATO and all of the EU and our allies totally united. We're moving forward with this ban, understanding that many of our European allies and partners may not be in a position to join us. The United States produces far more oil domestically than all the European countries combined. In fact, we're a net exporter of energy. So we can take this step when others cannot.
President Biden has made it clear the United States will share in the responsibility of caring for the refugees, so the costs do not fail entirely on the European countries bordering Ukraine. The decision is not without cost. Putin's war is already hurting American families at the gas pump. Since Putin began his military buildup on Ukraine's borders, just since then, the price of the gas at the pump in America went up 75 cents. And with this action, is going to go up further. Biden has said he is going to do everything he can to minimize Putin's price hike. In coordination with United States partners, U.S. has already announced that they are releasing 60 million barrels of oil from their joint oil reserves. The crisis is a stark reminder to protect the economy over the long term and reminded that they need to become energy independent. Russia may continue to grind out its advance at a horrible price, but this much is already clear. Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country. And if the United States do not respond to Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, the cost of freedom and to the American people will be even greater tomorrow. Biden says United States going to continue to support the brave Ukrainian people as they fight for their country, and call on Congress to pass the $12 billion Ukraine assistance package that has asked them. The United States imported more than 20.4 million barrels of crude and refined products a month, on average from Russia in 2021, about 8% of U.S. liquid fuel imports, according to the Energy Information Administration, and the ban is expected to send already high gasoline prices and inflation soaring. The United States also import a negligible amount of coal from Russia. Biden has predicted prices would rise further as a result of Putin's war, but pledged to do all he could to minimize the impact on the American people. He also warned U.S. gas companies against exploiting the situation to engage in profiteering on price gouging. The White House had been coordinating with U.S. congressional leaders working on a fast-tracking bipartisan legislation to ban Russian imports, but the ban of Russian imports would make any such bill moot. Biden has said that the Ukraine crisis should spur a move for energy independence by the U.S. and Europe in a move to a green economy. Republican lawmakers took to social media to welcome the decision while criticizing Biden's green energy policies and calling for the administration to support more oil and gas production at home.
South Koreans vote for a new president on Wednesday, with an outspoken Liberal ruling party candidate and a Conservative former prosecutor considered the favourites in a tight race that has aggravated domestic divisions.
Pre-election surveys have showed Liberal Lee Jae-myung, a former governor of South Korea's most populous Gyeonggi province, and his main conservative challenger, ex-prosecutor general Yoon Suk-yeol, with neck-and-neck support, way ahead of 10 other contenders. The winner will take office in May and serve a single 5-year term as leader of the world's 10th largest economy. Lee and Yoon have conducted one of the most bitter political campaigns in recent memory. Both recently agreed that if they won, they would not conduct politically motivated investigations against the other, but many believe the losing candidate could still face criminal probes over some of the scandals they've been implicated in. Critics say neither candidate has presented a clear strategy on how they would ease the threat from North Korea and its nuclear weapons. They also say voters are skeptical about how both would handle international relations amid the U.S.-China rivalry and how they would address widening economic inequality and runaway housing prices. The election comes as South Korea has been grappling with an Omicron-driven COVID-19 surge. On Wednesday, South Korea's health authorities reported 342,446 new virus cases, another record high. After the voting began at 6 a.m., mask-wearing voters have waited in long lines at some polling stations before putting on vinyl gloves or using hand sanitizer to cast ballots. People infected with the coronavirus were to vote after regular voting ends Wednesday evening. About 44 million South Koreans aged 18 or older are eligible to vote out of the country's 52 million people. About 16 million cast ballots during early voting last week. About 3.5 hours after Wednesday's voting began, the turnout stood at 8.2%, according to the website of the National Election Commission. Ahead of the vote, Jung Eun-young, a 48-year-old Seoul resident, has said she was agonizing over which candidate is the lesser of two evils. "Nobody around me seems happy about voting for either Lee or Yoon," she has said. "We need a leader who would be really devoted to improving the lives of working-class citizens." While both Lee and Yoon share some similar economic and welfare policies, they have clashed over North Korea and other foreign policy issues. On confrontation between Washington, Seoul's top military ally, and Beijing, its biggest trading partner, Lee says picking a side would pose a greater security threat to South Korea. Yoon wants to place a priority on an enhanced alliance with the United States. After North Korea's latest reported ballistic missile launched Saturday, Yoon has accused North Korean leader Kim Jong-un of trying to influence the results of the South Korean election in favor of Lee. South Korea's constitution limits a president to a single 5-year term, so Lee's party colleague, President Moon Jae-in, cannot seek a re-election. Moon came to power in 2017 after conservative President Park Geun-hye was impeached and ousted from office over a huge corruption scandal. Lee, a former human rights lawyer who entered local politics in 2005, has established an image as a tough-speaking anti-elitist who can get things done and fix establishment politics. But his opponents call him a dangerous populist relying on divisions and demonizing opponents. Yoon has launched a political offensive on Lee over allegations that Lee is a key figure in a corrupt land development project launched in the city of Seongnam when he was mayor there. Lee has tried to link Yoon to that scandal. Both of their wives have offered public apologies over separate scandals. Whoever wins will likely struggle to bridge conservative-liberal divisions. Both candidates have failed to create their own distinctive images because they become absorbed in party allegiances amid partisan animosity, so the race was defined by negative campaigning, said Shin Yul, a politics professor at Seoul's Myongji University. Whoever wins will be tasked with an important but difficult task of healing the divisions.
Lithuania's President Gintas Nausėda on Monday, March 7th, has warned Washington's top diplomat, Antony Blinken, that the failure to stop Russian aggression in Ukraine would lead to a global conflict. Addressing the US Secretary of State, and he has been on tour of the Baltic states, Nausėda has said Russian leader Vladimir Putin would not stop in Ukraine and that the world had an obligation to help Ukrainians by all means available.
NATO member Lithuania has sent military aid to Ukraine and has welcomed small numbers of Ukrainian refugees since Russia's invasion began on February 24. Blinken has said the U.S. would defend every inch of NATO territory in the event of an attack and has said supporting Ukrainians was the most urgent matter. Blinken met Nausėda before talks with Lithuania's foreign minister and prime minister and has visited neighboring Latvia and Estonia on Monday and Tuesday. NATO countries have ramped up their presence in the Baltic nations in recent weeks and more troops and equipment are on the way, policymakers have announced. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said an attack on one NATO ally is an attack on all. The United States, with all its allies and partners, will defend every inch of NATO territory should it come under attack, and there should be no doubt about that on anyone's mind.
Now look up the news making international headlines this Monday, the 7th of March.
Ukrainian military have helped residents in the city of Irpin to escape as heavy Russian shelling hit on Sunday, March 6. Abandoning buildings on fire and carrying plastic bags, people took the only escape route out of the town with their children and pets in the attempt to reach bus and vehicles that would take them to safety. Ukrainian police have said there was relentless Russian shelling and air raids in the northeast Kharkiv region, reporting many casualties, while the United Nations World Health Organization have said there had been several attacks on Ukrainian healthcare facilities. Irpin is located 24 kilometers from the capital Kiev. Moscow and Kiev have traded blame over Saturday's March 5 failed ceasefire to allow civilians to flee Mariupol and Volnovakha, two southern cities besieged by Russian forces. Ukraine has said more talks were set for Monday, March 7, but Russia was less definitive. People who have been able to escape Ukraine have spilled into neighboring Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and elsewhere. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called called on those in areas occupied by Russian troops to fight.
Over 1.36 million people have fled Ukraine since the start of the special military operation launched by Russia on February the 24th, with Poland taking in over 756,000 refugees, according to the latest UN data released on Saturday. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, a total of 1,368,864 people have fled their homes seeking safety, protection and assistance. Most of the refugees are going to neighbouring countries such as Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary and Moldova. As the situation continues to unfold, an estimated 4 million people may flee Ukraine, said the agency. The bloc has relaxed its rules on refugees and said its member states will welcome them with open arms. In the light of emergency and paramount humanitarian needs of refugees from Ukraine, an inter-agency regional refugees response is being carried out in support of refugees hosting countries' efforts in the UNHCR. The agency has also said that the situation in Ukraine could be Europe's largest refugee crisis in this century.
Italian police have seized villas and yachts worth at least 140 million euros, or about $153 million from 4 high-profile Russians who were placed on a European sanction list following Moscow's attack on Ukraine, sources said on Saturday, March 5th. A police source has said a villa owned by a billionaire businessman Alisher Osmanov on the Mediterranean island of Sardinia and a villa on Lake Como owned by state TV host Vladimir Soloviev had both been seized. In addition, sources have confirmed that yachts belonging to Russia's richest man Alexei Mordashov and Gennady Timchenko, who has close ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin, were impounded overnight in the northern Italian ports of Imperia and Salerno. Russian oligarchs are believed to have bought numerous villas in choice Italian locations over the past 20 years, and sources have said more assets were expected to be seized in coming days as Western states implement massive sanctions to try to force Russia to withdraw from Ukraine. Italian banks were instructed by the Bank of Italy's Finance Intelligence Division on Friday, March 4th, to urgently let it know of all measures taken to freeze the assets of people and entities placed on the European Union list. Uzbekistan-born metals and telecoms tycoon Osmanov is well known in Italy for owning multiple properties on Sardinia, while Italian media say Mordashov owned a villa worth some 66 million euros, or about $72 million on the same island. Taking into account the assets of his whole family, Forbes magazine estimates that Mordashov had an estimated net value of $29.1 billion before sanctions hit. His 215-feet yacht, the Lady M, had a price tag of 65 million euros, or about $70.70 million, while Timchenko's boat Lena was worth some 50 million euros, or around $54 million, a police source has said. Timchenko made a fortune in oil trading and has been described by Putin as one of his closest associates. Soloviev has reportedly complained on Russian television when he found out last month that he risked losing his Italian villa. He was quoted as saying that Europe has sacred property rights.
Now look at the news making international headlines Wednesday, 9th of March.
2 fires broke out at oil depot in the Zhytomyr region of Ukraine on Monday, March 7, with the country's state emergency services saying they were caused by 2 Russian airstrikes. One fire is in the city of Zhytomyr, while the other was in Chernyakhyiv. There were no reported casualties or injuries as a result of either fire. The Zhytomyr fire was said to have been contained at 9:30 p.m. The Russian Defense Ministry says that on Saturday, March 5, in aerial combat near Zhytomyr, about 100 kilometers west of Kiev, 4 Ukrainian Su-27 fighter jets had been shot down.
The chief of South Korea's ruling party was admitted to hospital on Monday, March the 7th, after being hit on the head with a stranger while held other rally in southeastern port city of Busan and wished Song a rapid recovery. Yoon has issued a statement saying any violence interfering in the election could not be justified and hoping the Song's speedy recovery and the campaign's safety. A tight race between Lee Jae-myung and ruling Democratic Party of Yoon Suk-yeol and a conservative main opposition People Power Party was reflected in a record turnout of nearly 37% in 2 days of absentee votes that ended on Saturday, March 5th. South Koreans were voting for a new president Wednesday, with an outspoken Liberal ruling party candidate and a Conservative former prosecutor considered for the favourites in a tight race that aggravated domestic divisions.
Flood warnings have stretched across Australia's east coast on Tuesday, March 8th. Tens of thousands of Sydney residents fled their homes overnight as torrential rains again pummeled a large swath of the country. Australia's eastern rivers were already near capacity following record downpours in several parts of Queensland and New South Wales states over recent weeks, cutting off towns and sweeping away farms, livestock, and roads. 19 people have been killed, most either in flooded homes or in cars, attempting to cross flooded roads since the deluge began. A tough 24 hours or even 48 hours ahead, Bureau of Meteorology forecaster Dean Naramore has said during a media briefing on Tuesday as he forecasts up to 5 inches of rain across Sydney over the next 24 hours, with the storm clearing by late Wednesday, March 9th. Heavy rains have lashed Sydney overnight, with some suburbs receiving up to 7 inches of rainfall since the morning of Monday, March 7th, exceeding March's mean rainfall of around 5.5 inches, triggering flash flooding and snap evacuation orders in the southwest of the city.
If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me, Andrew Barnes-Roberts, and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia.
The United Nations Ambassador, Permanent Representative of Cambodia, Aung San Suu Kyi, reported what he calls the bias of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Cambodia to the 49th session of the Human Rights Council, saying that the OHCHR in Cambodia acts silently on the dangerous populist rhetoric of certain opposition elements, saying their approach to spread disinformation through discriminatory insults and slander, incite racial hatred, xenophobia, and cause seduction with cash offers. EAC News reporter Decca Nin has the story.
In a statement issued on Tuesday, March 8th, Cambodia's permanent representative to the United Nations, Aung San Suu Kyi, agreed with the president of the High Commissioner for Human Rights over the politicization of the council and the biased version of a supposed hierarchy among categories of human rights. and expressed disappointment that the High Commissioner appeared to be ill-advised and selective regarding the situation in Cambodia. The permanent representative of Cambodia said he is disappointed with the statement that the strike of the former Naga World Casino workers was legal.
To say that the casino workers' strike is lawful is erroneous. The court has declared illegal since last December. The resident had complained of being disturbed by this months-long unlawful protest. Authorities exercised utmost restraint and even knelt down to plead their compliance for the COVID protocols. At least 130 protesters had tested positive.
He then asked the High Commissioner whether a proscribed protest disrupting public order and abusing public health measures could be considered a constitutional exercise of the peaceful assembly. He further added that an inter-ministerial meeting headed by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Interior convened on Wednesday, March 9th to address the month-long politicized labor dispute. Cambodia's representative to the UN also noted that the OHCHR in Cambodia had been silent on dangerous populist rhetoric of certain opposition elements, whose approach, he said, is to spread disinformation, throw indiscriminate insult and slander, incite racial hatred and xenophobia, and call on sedition with cash offers. He once more posed a question, asking if these are what the High Commissioner could name as legitimate conducts under international law. In the coming months, Cambodia will hold its commune district council elections. The permanent representative of Cambodia has said that the absence of one political party in the coming election, due to its violation of the laws, does not detract Cambodia from pluralism. He has further stressed that regardless of the result, an indisputable fact is that voters can choose one among the 17 political parties already inscribed in the election. All the voters' equal political rights and dignity, whether large or small, must be respected. Dekanin, EAC News.
The United Nations ambassador and a permanent representative to Cambodia, Aung San Suu Kyi, responded to the US permanent representative to United Nations on the 49th session of the Human Rights Council, saying that the US should respect the autonomy of independent countries and not weaponize human rights with double standards. The Cambodian permanent representative reminded the US delegation to heed UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' call for human rights not to be used as a weapon if all parties want to maintain the highest integrity and credibility of Human Rights Council. Every country has a right to choose its own future and its path, he said, quoting US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Cambodia's response comes after the US ambassador to United Nations, Michelle Taylor, expressed concern over the closure of political rights, the right to protest and the arrest or detention of dissents of some of the countries, including Cambodia. The Cambodian representative, Aung San Suu Kyi, stated in his response to the United States' use of human rights issues as weapons that attacked and served a political agenda was well known to many delegates at the Human Rights Council. He further rejected the allegations made by the United States, saying that there was no biased law enforced in Cambodia and that the space for civil society rights was respected by the royal government. He said if the civil society freedom was restrictive, why does the number of registered NGOs keep rising to nearly 6,000? The fact is that the grievances come from a handful of heavily politicised and foreign-funded NGOs demanding transparency but refusing to prove themselves transparent. He urged the United States to adjust its own respect for human rights rather than just look at the problems of others, as its internal obligations remain unresolved. The Cambodian permanent representative said, sadly, this country has for years encountered symptomatic human rights messes, including double standards and hypocrites. In 2001, more than 700 people who had dissenting voice were arrested and charged with crimes after descending on US Capitol. In the same year, more than 50 journalists were arrested and detained across the US. Social media accounts of the former president with just opposing view were banned. The groundbreaking ceremony of the new Win-Win Monument in An Long Veng District, Oda Mache Province was held on Wednesday, 9th of March, presided over the Ministry of National Defence, Deputy Prime Minister T. Bang. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has the details.
The site of the new Win-Win Monument is located in Phnom Piroi, Tropiang Prey Commune, An Long Veng District, Oda Minjay Province. Speaking at the groundbreaking ceremony, Deputy Prime Minister T. Bang said that the success of Prime Minister Hun Sen's win-win policy is seen through the history of An Long Veng, which was the last stronghold of the Khmer Rouge. He said that this success has provided lessons, experiences, and a vision to other countries on how such a policy can be effective in ending political and military conflicts. He continued that the achievements in Ong Long Veng district are as a result of the collective contribution of various stakeholders, including the Royal Cambodian Armed Forces, members of other institutions, and the former Cambodia Democratic Forces who came to the groundbreaking in the spirit of unity, and who will continue to hold the flag of peace for new generations. He said this monument is an invaluable part of Cambodia's historical defense and peace process, then shared the previous words of Prime Minister Hun Sen, who said that when there is peace, there is hope. The first Win Win Memorial was built in Choi Jong Wat District, Prekta Sek Commune, Phnom Penh, and inaugurated in 2018. A second Win Win Memorial is under construction in Koh Kong, and the third now in Ong Long Veng District, Udon Minjay Province. Nekanin, EAC News.
The Cambodian Mine Action Centre in Set received over $6.4 million from the US and Norwegian governments for the clearance of a cluster mutation remnants of the landmines in Cambodia. EAC News reporter Darshana Guchan has further details.
The Director General of CMAC, Heng Ratana, and the resident representative of the Norwegian People Aid, Rune Dale Anderson, signed the cooperation agreements at CMAC's Phnom Penh headquarters on Wednesday, 9th March. According to Heng Ratana, around $6.3 million of the total amount is allocated for a cluster munitions remnant survey and clearance in eastern Cambodia, funded by the U.S. government, and the remaining $89,000 is allocated for two short-term projects. The first is the landmine survey and clearance on the Cambodia-Thailand border project, and the second is the landmine-free provinces in southern part of Cambodia project funded by the government of Norway. The support from the U.S. will enable CMAC to provide humanitarian services with around 200 demining experts to be deployed to the provinces of Kampong Cham, Tabong Khmum, Kroche, Stung Treng, Svai Rieng, Pre Veng, Mondulkiri, and Ratanakiri for cluster munitions remnant survey and clearance. With a duration of 45 months from 1st of March to 30th November 2022, the CMAC expects to clear a targeted land area of 13,200 hectares of cluster munitions. For their part, the demining clearance project will assist CMAC to realize its strategic plans to support the royal government of Cambodia to achieve the country's commitment to the AP Man-Bind Convention by 2025. The CMAC and NPA have a long history of cooperation since 1992, which has included the removal of the threat of landmines and explosive remnants of war, the return of hope, and the rebuilding of a prosperous future for Cambodians. The CMAC Director General said, CMAC wishes to profoundly thank the government and people of America and Norway for their continued commitment and strong support to mine action. Both financial and in-kind contributions have extensively enabled CMAC to have a stronger and more effective operations to fight against the hidden killers and to respond to the needs of millions of people affected by landmines and explosive remnants of war, as well as to support socio-economic development of Cambodia. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
10 more vaccine trucks are scheduled to be delivered to the Lao government from the Royal Government of Cambodia at the Taprang Kleo International Border Crossing, Sang Trang Province, bordering the Lao Province of Chapunsak this Saturday, 12th of March. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has more details.
In a statement issued by the Ministry of Health on Wednesday, the ministry stated that the provision of additional vaccine trucks to the Lao People's Democratic Republic is an expression of Prime Minister Hun Sen's concern for the health and well-being of the Lao people as a neighbor to the country. This vaccine truck donation also signals the building up of defense systems together against COVID-19, as well as the strengthening of cooperation and humanitarianism between Cambodia and Laos. The statement said, Cambodia is a small but generous country, and Cambodia has always been committed to the spirit of friendship, solidarity, and togetherness, with good cooperation in resolving the crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic both in the country and in the region. On December 3, 2021, the Cambodian government provided 400,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines and 3 vaccine trucks to the Lao government to assist the country in the fight against COVID-19. The donation came after a meeting between Prime Minister Hun Sen and Lao Prime Minister Phongkham Viphavan at the Peace Palace on the 29th of November 2021. Cambodia has already provided aid to Laos 3 times, totaling about $13 million, 700,000 doses of vaccines, 3 vaccine trucks, 2.1 million masks, and other medical equipment. Dekanin, EAC News.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said on Tuesday that the alliance's responsibility was to ensure the conflict between Russia and Ukraine does not escalate and spread beyond Ukraine. All NATO partners work together on the situation in Ukraine. It is important that NATO is a defence organisation, which means it won't be getting directly involved in the war.
Speaking alongside Latvia's President Egils Levits at Riga Castle, Stoltenberg has said Russia's invasion was causing horrific suffering.
The suffering we now see in Ukraine is horrific. It affects us all. And we have a responsibility to ensure the conflict does not escalate and spread beyond Ukraine. That would be even more dangerous, destructive, and even more deadly. The situation could spiral out of control.
The United Nations have said the number of refugees who have fled Ukraine had surged past 2 million, describing the flight as one of the fastest exoduses in modern times. Moscow describes its actions in Ukraine as a special operation to disarm its neighbor and unset leaders it calls neo-Nazis. Ukraine and its Western allies call this as a baseless pretext for an invasion to conquer a country of 44 million people.
Conservative political novice vows national unity after winning the most closely fought election in recent South Korean history. Yoon Suk-yeol, a Conservative former top prosecutor, has been elected South Korea's new president, defeating his chief Liberal rival in one of the country's most closely fought presidential elections.
60-year-old Yoon from the main opposition People Power Party has edged out the ruling Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung with 48.6% of the vote to 47.8%, with around 99.8% of the ballots counted as of 5:30 a.m. on Thursday. At a separate ceremony with supporters, Yoon has mentioned he would put top priority on national unity, adding all people should be treated equally regardless of their regional, political, and socioeconomic differences. Yoon has also mentioned he would honor the constitution and parliament and work with opposition parties to heal polarized politics and foster unity, calling the election a victory of the great people. Lee had conceded defeat and congratulated his opponent. Yoon's 5-year term will begin this month to replace incumbent President Moon Jae-in, who is constitutionally barred from seeking re-election. The election boiled down to a two-way showdown between Yoon from the opposition People Power Party and Lee from the governing Democratic Party. They spent months slamming, mocking, and demonizing each other in one of the most bitter political campaigns in recent memory, aggravating the country's already severe domestic divisions. Yoon has added he would deal with North Korean provocations sternly and seek to boost trilateral security cooperation with Washington and Tokyo. He has also highlighted that he would make an enhanced alliance with the United States the center of his foreign policy while taking a more assertive stance on China. The election came as South Korea has been grappling with an Omicron-driven COVID-19 surge. On Wednesday, health authorities have reported 342,446 new virus cases, a record high. People infected with the coronavirus voted after regular voting ended on Wednesday evening. With conservatives initially in shambles after Park's fall, Moon's approval rating at one point hit 83% as he pushed hard to achieve reconciliation with North Korea and delve into alleged corruption by past conservative leaders. He has eventually faced a strong backlash as talks on North Korea's nuclear program have faltered, and his anti-corruption drive has raised questions of fairness. Yoon had been Moon's prosecutor general but resigned and joined the opposition last year following infighting about probes of Moon's allies. Yoon has stated those investigations were objective and principled, but Moon's supporters have claimed he was trying to thwart Moon's prosecution reforms and elevate his own political standing. Yoon's critics have also attacked him for a lack of experience in any party politics, foreign policy, and other key state affairs. Yoon has responded that he would let experienced officials handle state affairs that require expertise.
Already struggling with rising living costs, ordinary Europeans now face an even deeper hit to their livelihoods as the conflict in Ukraine pushes fuel and fuel prices higher, threatens to spark all-out recession.
The surging price of crude oil on world markets has led to the biggest ever weekly jump in gasoline prices at some service stations around Europe, pushing them in some cases above €2 or $2.21 for a liter of unleaded fuel. The problem is not the price, it will be tomorrow, but how much gasoline will cost in 15 days from now. We think that it is going to cost much more. I think bad times are ahead of us, a 76-year-old Madrid pensioner Alejandro Otirino has said. That fear of prices spiraling out of control is precisely what the European Central Bank must try to allay at its meeting on Thursday, March 10, when ECB Chief Christine Lagarde will aim to prove it can keep a lead on inflation in the euro area that had already clipped a higher than expected 5.8% before Russia's invasion. There is a natural pressure on central banks to keep inflation expectations low via communication, but at the same time, they risk losing credibility, according to an economics professor at Leipzig University. In Portugal, Western Europe's poorest country with 10% of the population on a minimum wage of €705, motorists have been rushing to fill tanks before any prices hikes come in. A diesel car with a 50-liter tank costs €91 to fill up. Knock-on impacts are being felt already. Activity in the Portuguese-Spanish border have increased recently, as many drivers have decided to cross to Galicia or Extremadura in Spain to fill their tanks cheaper. German motoring organization ADAC have estimated that diesel prices had spiked a massive 28% in 6 days, in part because homeowners were stepping up to purchase of heating oil is still used by many Germans to heat their houses. For now, increases in the end prices of food have been less dramatic, but with Ukraine and Russia both exporters of grain and Russia a major supplier of fertilizers, concern is growing that this will add to inflationary pressures as the war goes on. The fear now is that this will hit consumer spending ever harder, especially among the low-income households who fared worse during pandemic lockdowns in which they did not benefit from furloughs or faced other hits to their livelihoods. First, the pandemic, with little work and about 70 or 80% of losses. Then the price of electricity starts going up. But the problem is that it does not stop going up. Every day it goes up and it has not doubled itself. It has tripled itself. People have gone from paying about €400 to €1,000. In Britain, the Resolution Foundation think tank estimated the conflict would lead to wider inflation, shaving 4% of the real level of typical household incomes over the coming year, the sharpest fall in nearly half a century. An expert says that the governments now must inevitably have to pump more support into the economy to help the worst hit. The only way to avoid the vicious circle of more inflation was for the bank to pursue its tightening path.
The Minister of Interior, Deputy Prime Minister Saw King, has called on the provincial authorities to take care and to prevent the destruction of natural resources in the Tolosap Lake. He made this call while speaking at the closing ceremony of the meeting to summarise the work, the results of 2021 and to set the work direction of 2022 of the Battambang Provincial Administration on Thursday 10th of March in Battambang City. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has more details.
Deputy Prime Minister Saw King urged the provincial authorities in the Tonle Sap Lake area to visit and teach people about the benefits of natural resources so that they can take care and protect the environment together. He said, the Tonle Sap Lake authorities must teach the people around the lake area to help protect, take care, and help manage the natural forests so that the provincial administration and the Somluth district governor can prevent our natural forests from disappearing. He also instructed all professional and relevant officials to disseminate information to the local people on the boundaries of the flooded forests in the Tonle Sap Lake area, in order to set up the correct post and to further advise the district governors adjacent to the lake to carefully manage and protect the natural resources in the area. He especially urged all district governors around the Tonle Sap Lake to not be involved in illegal encroachment of flooded forest land. The Deputy Prime Minister also asked the royal government to support the provincial administration in this endeavor, emphasizing that if not done well, they will receive criticism from the future generations. More than 15,000 families in 6 provinces around the Tonle Sap Lake have voluntarily returned nearly 70,000 hectares of illegally occupied land to the state, 3 months after the government issued a rule by order of the Prime Minister on November 28, 2021 to reclaim this land. Dekanin, EAC News.
The 11th Cambodian EU Joint Committee meeting was held in Phnom Penh in a hybrid format Thursday and Friday, 10th-11th of March, to review the progress made since the 10th Joint Committee meeting held in Brussels back in 2018. The meeting was co-chaired by the Secretary of State of Cambodian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Deputy Managing Director for Asian Pacific European External Action Service. EAC News reporter Dashana Guchin has more details.
According to a joint press release issued by Cambodia and the European Union, the 11th Cambodia-EU Joint Committee meeting saw the exchange of views on a wide range of bilateral and multilateral issues, including the latest political developments in both Cambodia and the EU. The meeting also discussed other matters such as the situation in Ukraine, Cambodia's chairmanship of ASEAN, the situation in Myanmar, the global economy, climate change, EU-ASEAN strategic partnership and cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. The EU commended Cambodia for successfully convening the 13th Asia-Europe meeting in 2021, which demonstrated the shared efforts and commitment in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic and ensuring that multilateralism remains relevant and effective in addressing regional and global issues. The EU further expressed its full support for Cambodia's 2022 ASEAN chairmanship, as well as the appointment of the Minister of Foreign Affairs Deputy Prime Minister Prak Sokhonn as the Special Envoy of ASEAN to Myanmar. 3 main subgroups under the headings of trade and investment, cooperation, and institution building, administrative reform, legal and judicial reform, governance, and human rights also moved forward with discussions on progress in each respective subgroup's focus. The subgroup on institution building, administrative reform, legal and judicial reform, governance, and human rights exchanged views on key developments on human rights, anti-trafficking policies, and ratifications of international conventions, as well as Cambodia's multidimensional reform efforts and preparation towards the upcoming 2022 commune elections. The subgroup on trade and investment reviewed Cambodia-EU bilateral trade and the investment climate in Cambodia, noting that bilateral trade in 2020 and 2021 had passed the €4 billion mark. The meeting further discussed matters related to economic recovery measures, bilateral trade and investment relations, and both sides expressed a commitment to further strengthening cooperation to ensure Cambodia's investment climate remains open, well-facilitated, competitive, and conducive to sustainable socio-economic development. Finally, the subgroup on development cooperation highlighted the progress made in relation to EU's continued support to Cambodia's development, with particular appreciation for the adoption of the EU's new cooperation multi-annual indicative program valued at €155 million for the period between 2021 to 2024, and which focuses on the 3 priority areas of green growth and decent jobs, education and skills development, and good governance. Both parties exchanged progress on policy reform, particularly in the EU-supported sectors of education, public financial management, social protection, and fisheries, and expressed value for the progress in thematic and regional cooperation programs, such as ASEAN regional integration support from the EU. At the end of the meeting, it was agreed that the 12th Cambodia-EU Joint Committee and its 3 subgroup meetings would be held in 2023 in Brussels. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Deputy Prime Minister Prak Sokhonn, celebrated the 26th anniversary of the Asian-Europe meeting on the 1st of March 2022 and addressed the ASEAN partners through a video speech. EAC News reporter Dashana Guchin has more.
ASEM is now the largest cooperation framework, second to the United Nations, representing 60% of the global population, 55% of global trade, 65% of the global economy, and 75% of global tourism. Last year, Cambodia had the honor of hosting the 13th ASEM Summit under the theme of Strengthening Multilateralism for Shared Growth. Deputy Prime Minister Prak Sokhonn said he was pleased to see ASEM leaders reaffirm their commitments to revitalize multilateralism towards a more resilient, sustainable, inclusive, and dynamic future of Asia-Europe cooperation. He added that ASEM leaders also tackled global and regional challenges such as global actions against COVID-19 and climate change, enhancing public health and safety, focusing on youth employment and women's empowerment, and resolving to tackle World Trade Organization reforms, among others. The Deputy Prime Minister described how at the last ASEM meeting, 3 important documents were produced. First, the ASEM 13 Chair Statement. Second, the Phnom Penh Statement on Post-COVID-19 Socioeconomic Recovery. And third, the Way Forward on ASEM Connectivity. These documents solidified ASEM's solidarity to maintain and promote peace, stability, and prosperity in Asia and Europe for a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient future for current and future generations. He said it is important for ASEM to persevere in the difficult times ahead and must prioritize commitment in each other's partnership to build a cohesive, competitive, resilient, and sustainable community for Asia and Europe. He stressed this common goal to ensure multilateralism will create stability and prosperity for all, and will hopefully address the emerging regional and global issues under the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Deputy Prime Minister concluded that Cambodia looks forward to working closely with all ASEM partners and relevant stakeholders to foster ASEM cooperation and friendly relations to a new height, addressing common concerns and, most importantly, implementing the ASEM 13 measures. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
The Minister of Commerce, Pan Salsak, received a visit from the Ambassador of Australia to Cambodia, Pablo Kang, and his colleagues Thursday in the Ministry of Commerce, where the two exchanged comments and held a discussion on the progress of bilateral and regional cooperation in the field of economic and trade between Cambodia and Australia. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has more.
Minister Pan Sosa welcomed the ambassador and his colleagues and also extended his thanks to the Australian Minister of Commerce, Dan Thi Hunt, for his full support of Cambodia assuming the 2022 ASEAN chairmanship. As the chair of the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting, Minister Pan Sosa informed the Australian ambassador about progress surrounding the negotiations on the upgrade of the ASEAN-Australia-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, AANZ-FTA, which is one of Cambodia's priority economic achievements for 2022 under the 4th key strategic goal of ASEAN globalization for growth and development. He stressed the need to accelerate and speed up negotiations on the remaining issues in order to complete the negotiations and upgrade the AANZ-FTA in a timely manner as planned. He also briefed the ambassador on the progress of Timor-Leste application for ASEAN membership and the World Trade Organization. In response, the Australian ambassador expressed his appreciation for Cambodia's proposed economic priorities that reflect a response to global developments, particularly the conclusion of negotiations around the upgrade of the AANZ-FTA, which he said is a main priority for cooperation between ASEAN, Australia, and New Zealand in 2022. The ambassador also reaffirmed Australia's continued support for Cambodia as the rotating chair of ASEAN in 2022 and pledged to continue working closely with the kingdom to achieve Cambodia's priority achievements to build a sustainable and resilient ASEAN community. He further informed the Minister of Commerce about the excellent progress made on cooperation in the field of competition and consumer protection, in which he reaffirmed Australia will continue to support capacity building and technical assistance to the Ministry of Commerce officials, as it is an important contribution to improving the business and investment environment in Cambodia. Concluding the meeting, both sides noted the growth of bilateral trade between Cambodia and Australia and pledged to continue boosting trade and investment and strengthening cooperation efforts to rehabilitate all sectors and industries in the aftermath of COVID-19 crisis. Dekanin, EAC News.
The Ministry of Labour and Vocational Training reported on Thursday that 147 out of 373 former employees of Naga World, equivalent to 40%, have decided to accept a settlement with the Meditation of Ministry, who continues to request the stop of protests and turn to further meditation. EAC News reporter Darshana Gochan has the story.
In a press release issued on Thursday, 10th March, the Ministry of Labour said that from 18th to 27th December 2021, the Ministry of Labour and Vocational Training invited the disputed parties to explore the possibility of further mediation in accordance with the Labour Law 7 times. At the time, the ministry said the side of the Naga World workers continued to maintain their demand for Naga World Limited to take back the 373 protesting workers and then discuss other demands. However, according to the ministry's settlement as of Wednesday 9th March, 147 out of 373 former employees have accepted legal compensation, making the total number of remaining former employees still rejecting the compensation and seeking further retribution from Naga World 226 people. Based on the procedures enforced by the law in order to resolve the dispute peacefully, to protect the interests of both workers and employers, and to contribute to the preservation of public interest, the ministry has called on all former employees of Naga World who took part in the strikes to stop making mistakes that affect their legitimate interests. The ministry has also stated that it will continue to cooperate with relevant institutions to address all concerns of the protesters, as well as consider the legal rights of investors. In April 2021, Naga World announced plans to lay off 1,329 employees, including the 373 employees who refused to accept compensation and went on strike on 18 December 2021, despite the Cambodian courts deeming such protests to be illegal. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Wednesday, March 9th, the international community will be responsible for the mass humanitarian catastrophe if it is not agreed to a no-fly zone to protect his country.
Українки. Одним з головних завдань для нас сьогодні була
Zelensky has said the threat level in Ukraine was at a maximum nearly 2 weeks ago into Russia's invasion, but Ukrainians had shown they would never give in. The Ukrainian leader has stated that Russia is using missiles, aviation, helicopters against his country, against civilians, against their cities, against their infrastructure. It is the humanitarian responsibility of the world to respond. But there is no decision. Ukraine has pleaded with Western nations to provide it with fighter jets to counter a Russian invasion that has forced more than 2 million refugees to flee the country. And U.S. lawmakers have responded by pushing President Joe Biden's administration to facilitate the transfer of aircraft. On Tuesday, Poland has said it was ready to deploy all its MiG-29 jets to Ramstein Air Base in Germany and put them on the disposal of the United States, urging other NATO members to do the same. The Pentagon has later dismissed the offer as not tenable. So when will there be a decision, Zelensky said. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday dismissed Russian allegations of biowarfare labs in Ukraine and said they showed that Russia was capable of chemical attacks. Meanwhile, Russia has made repeated accusations that the United States is working with Ukrainian laboratories to develop biological weapons. Such assertions in Russian media increased in the run-up to Moscow's military move into Ukraine and were made as recently on Wednesday, March 9, by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova. Zelensky has also said he worried the allegations meant that Russia might be prepared to deploy chemical weapons in Ukraine. The United States on Wednesday said the Russian accusations were laughable and suggested Moscow could be laying the groundwork to use a chemical biological weapon, worries that were also shared by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Thursday.
Number of outstanding issues.
The European Union should fully existing financial instruments to cope with the Ukraine crisis before launching the joint European Union funds for that purpose. Dutch Minister Mark Rutte has told the students in Paris during a speech at the Sciences Po University on Wednesday, March 9th.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine has plunged Europe into a new era of uncertainty. No one knows where Russia's aggression will end. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has called on the other members of the EU to make use of the existing instruments to the max and keep on holding talks about what they need to do more. Russia has announced a new ceasefire in Ukraine on Wednesday to let civilians flee besieged cities after days of mostly failed promises that have left hundreds of thousands of people trapped without access to medicine or fresh water. Rutte's speech comes ahead of a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron later on Wednesday and an EU leaders summit in Versailles on Thursday, March 10th, with the rise in energy prices and less dependence on Russian gas and oil noted as the main concerns. Rutte has also said he could imagine Germany rethinking their decision over leaving the nuclear sector, adding that nuclear energy is one of the ways for the bloc to decrease dependence on Russian gas and oil.
The United States on Wednesday, March 9th, has closed the door on the supplying combat aircraft to Ukraine, saying the intelligence community assessed it would be a high risk, the move that caused increased chances of Russia escalating with NATO.
NATO ally Poland has surprised Washington on Tuesday with a public offer to transfer its Russian-made MiG-29 fighter jets to a U.S. base in Germany. As a way to replenish Ukraine's air force, Kiev has implored the West for combat aircraft. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby has explained the U.S. decision, saying that the transfer of MiG-29s would change little for Ukraine relative to Russia's capabilities, and has stressed U.S. support for supplying other types of weapons.
Now, the Secretary also had a chance to discuss with Minister Blaszczak the proposal to send MiG-29 fighter aircraft to Ukraine, and specifically the notion of doing so by way of transfer to U.S. custody. Secretary Austin thanked the minister for Poland's willingness to continue to look for ways to assist Ukraine. But he stressed that we do not support the transfer of additional fighter aircraft to the Ukrainian Air Force at this time, and therefore have no desire to see them in our custody either. We believe the best way to support Ukrainian defense is by providing them the weapons and the systems that they need most to defeat Russian aggression, in particular, anti-armor and air defense. We, along with other nations, continue to send them these weapons, and we know that they are being used with great effect. The slowed Russian advance in the north and the contested airspace over Ukraine is evidence alone of that. Although Russian air capabilities are significant, their effectiveness has been limited due to Ukrainian strategic, operational, and tactical ground-based air defense systems, surface-to-air missiles, and manpads. Secondly, the Ukrainian Air Force currently has several squadrons of fully mission-capable aircraft. We assess that adding aircraft to the Ukrainian inventory is not likely to significantly change the effectiveness of the Ukrainian Air Force relative to Russian capabilities. Therefore, we believe that the gain from transferring those MiG-29s is low. And finally, the intelligence community has assessed that the transfer of MiG-29s to Ukraine may be mistaken as escalatory and could result in a significant Russian reaction that might increase the prospects of a military escalation with NATO. Therefore, we also assess the transfer of the MiG-29s to Ukraine to be high risk.
The Ukrainian Air Force currently has squadrons of mission-capable aircraft, and additional MiGs would provide little gain. Overall, Kirby has said, Kirby has declined to offer details on what specifically drove the U.S. intelligence assessment. The United States has sought to speed weapons deliveries to Ukraine, but it shrugged on Tuesday at the prospect of flying combat aircraft from NATO territory into the war zone. Russia's defense ministry has warned this week that countries even offering airfields to Ukraine, let alone flying in fighter jets, for attacks on Russia may be considered as having entered the conflict. NATO has said it does not want direct conflict with Russia, a fellow nuclear armed power, and President Joe Biden has rolled out sending U.S. troops into Ukraine to fight something the Pentagon has said would apply to troops on the ground or in the air, flying missions. The United States has also rolled out calls from Kiev to create a no-fly zone over Ukraine, something military experts say would be equivalent to the United States entering the war against Russia.
My wife Jill in the vice president.
Now for a look at the news making international headlines this Friday, 11th of March.
Over the past few days, Mount Merapi, located between central Java province and the special region of Yogyakarta, has increased its volcanic activity with pyroclastic and lava flows that descended into the southwestern flank above 5 kilometers from the summit, prompting over 250 residents in the surrounding area to evacuate, the country's disaster mitigation agency has said on Thursday, March 10. The eruption is ongoing, and according to the Geological Agency of Indonesia, the alert level status on a scale from 1 to 4 is set at level 3 and is showing an increase in activity. Potential dangers include more lava flows and hot clouds, warning people living within 7 kilometers of the volcano to keep away. Located on the Pacific Ring of Fire, Indonesia has more volcanoes than any other country. Merapi last violently erupted in 2010, killing more than 350 people.
Ничего тут не открывают, я
New members of the Ukraine Territorial Defence Forces were trained on how to operate anti-tank weapons during military exercises in Kyiv on Wednesday, March 9th. The reservists have trained on the NLAW and the AT-4 anti-tank launchers made in Germany and Sweden representative. The instructors say they have received a weapon just recently, unfortunately is late. Western countries have stepped up in arms deliveries to Ukraine. It is the first time the European Union has found in the wake of World War II with the purpose of upholding peace on the continent has collectively provided arms to a third country.
A total of 2,814 military infrastructure facilities in Ukraine have been damaged since the start of the Russian special military operation on 24th February, according to a Wednesday report from the Russian Federation's Ministry of Defense. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the facilities put out of order include 11 military airfields, 13 command posts and communication centers of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, a total of 139 S-300 Buk M1 and S-125 anti-aircraft missile systems, 84 radar stations, 974 tanks and other armored vehicles, 104 multiple launch rocket systems, 359 pieces of field artillery and mortars, 727 military vehicles, as well as 97 drones. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine claimed that as of Wednesday, Russia has lost 317 tanks, 1,070 armored vehicles, 120 artillery systems, 28 anti-aircraft systems, 56 MLRS, 49 fixed-wing airplanes, 81 helicopters, 482 ground vehicles, 3 ships, 60 tank trucks, and 7 drones since the beginning of the Russian invasion on 24th February.
If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me, Andrew Barnes-Roberts, and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia.
Australians say goodbye to the greatest cricketers in Australian history, one of the greatest wicketkeepers, Rodney Marsh, and one of the greatest spinners of all time on and off the field, Shane Warne. Both had died of heart attacks. They will be sadly missed.
One of the finest bowlers of all time, whose talent and personality transcended cricket, Warne died aged 52 on Friday, a day after arriving on the island of Koh Samui for a vacation. Warne, who ended his spellbinding international career in 2007 with a remarkable 708 test wickets, died from a suspected heart attack in Koh Samui, Thailand, his family confirmed in a statement. Shane was found unresponsive in his villa. Despite the best efforts of medical staff, he could not be revived, the statement read. Credited for reviving the art of leg spin, Warne made his test debut in 1992 against India, and by the time he ended his 15-year international career, the spinner had established himself as one of all-time greats of the game. He also had 293 wickets from 194 one-dayers and won the Man of the Match award when Australia beat Pakistan in the 1999 World Cup final. Warne's death comes hours after another former Australian cricket great wicket-keeper Rod Marsh died on Friday at the age of 74. Warne's last post on Twitter, 12 hours before his death was reported, was a tribute to Marsh. Sad to hear the news that Rod Marsh has passed. He was a legend of our great game and inspiration to so many young boys and girls. Rod cared deeply about cricket and gave so much, especially to Australia and England players, sending lots and lots of love to Rod and the family. Marsh, who played 96 tests in the 1970s and 1980s, died in Adelaide 8 days after suffering a heart attack while on his way to a charity event in Queensland. Regarded as one of Australia's finest wicket keepers, Marsh retired in 1984 with a then world record tally of 355 dismissals from behind the stumps. Marsh made his test debut against England in November 1970 and scored 3,633 test runs during a career that lasted more than 13 years. He famously combined with fellow Western Australian fast bowler Dennis Lillee to take 95 wickets during the pair's test career together. Sad to see two legendary cricketers go so close together. They will be missed.
Most athletes spend a lifetime perfecting one discipline, but American Ukraine Arsana Masters talented earned her a 12th Olympic medal across winter and summer games at Beijing Paralympics on Sunday.
Silver in the long-distance sitting event in cross-country skiing was a second podium in 2 days for the 32-year-old who took gold in the biathlon sitting sprint amid emotional scenes at the Zhangjiakou National Biathlon Center. I was trying to upgrade it from Sochi 2014 when I got a silver. I was chasing the gold medal. This is the one race that I was really looking forward to, but I'm so proud of myself, Masters told reporters. Masters finished behind China's Yang Hongqing and the host nation's Li Panpan secured bronze. I raced this 100% honest, clean, and in the right space, and I just did everything I could. And I'm so happy to bring home a medal for Team USA, added Masters. Ukrainian-born Masters won 2 gold medals in cycling at the Tokyo Paralympics last year, adding to her rowing bronze from London 2012. What made her performance in Tokyo even more impressive was that Masters had been diagnosed with a tumor in her leg during her preparations for the Games, but she underwent an operation and made a swift recovery. Masters was born with severe physical defects believed to have been caused by the Chernobyl nuclear disaster and spent her early years in orphanages. Her life changed at age 7 when she was adopted by an American woman, Gay Masters, and taken to the United States, where both her legs had to be amputated above the knee. Masters' adoptive mother was able to celebrate her silver medal in a video call. I owe a lot to my mom, she said after Saturday's gold before dedicating the win to the people of Ukraine, which has been invaded by Russia. It is for Team Ukraine and Ukrainian people. I'm so proud to be Ukrainian, to be American, and represent both, and that's the power of sports, that you can represent so much more than just one thing. Masters can add to her medal haul when she competes in 4 more events in biathlon and cross-country skiing. I'm definitely excited for the rest of the week because I got some unfinished business, she said.
4 months after the 97-year-old amateur Leonard Savetsky's dreams come true when he played 21 times Grand Slam champion Rafael Nadal, the Ukraine is ending his worst nightmare in Kharkiv in Russian former Supremacy City.
Stanislavski, who holds the Guinness World Record as the world's oldest tennis player, also had dreams of playing Swiss great Roger Federer, but now he has only one simple wish: survival. I hope I live to reach 100. I have to survive this frightening situation. The war started on February 24th. From the 24th till now, I have practically not gone out. I've stayed at home. I have supplies. The fridge is full. I'm sitting at home not going anywhere, he said. My daughter Tanya is in Poland. She wants to take me there, but I decided to stay here. I have bad hearing, so I sleep at night and don't hear anything. Last night there were bombings in the morning and there were air raid sirens again. Stanislavski survived the Second World War when he was an engineer who helped build Soviet warplanes to fight the Nazis. I never thought that I would have to live through another more frightening war where people from both sides are dying. Mothers are losing their children, wives are losing their sons and their husbands, he added. What is this? What good is it? In the 21st century, there can't be war. The war needs to be stopped. An agreement has to be reached. For Stanislavski, an end to the conflict would also mean the chance to resume playing tennis and possibly to appear at the next Seniors World Championships in Florida next month. He was 30 when he was introduced to the sport and used to train 3 times a week. Tennis is my life, my destiny. I've played tennis at a serious level since I was 90. I've played abroad, I've played in world championships, I've played in the European championships. I'm not afraid of anyone. I'm hoping that the war will end and I will be able to play tennis. If I could get to Poland, I would play there, but I decided to stay at home and wait for the end of the war, he said.
Denmark's Mad Pedersen won the sprint to finish the Stage 3 of the Paris-Nice race on Tuesday, March 8th, after all leader Christopher Laporte crashed in the final stage.
Trek Segafredo rider Pedersen beat Frenchman Brian Coquart and Belgian Wout van Aert to the line in a dramatic finish which saw Laporte fall to the ground after getting caught up with another rider in the final 500 meters. The Frenchman was able to get back on his bike and finish the stage with a bleeding leg. He now leads his teammate Van Aert by just 1 second and Slovenian Primož Roglič by 9 seconds. Pedersen has said, "We missed out yesterday with a bit of bad luck with Kirch having a puncture and me losing a chain. We wanted to make it up today and man, the boys did a fantastic job the whole day to make it as easy as possible for me."
The Court of Arbitration for Sport announced on Tuesday, the 8th of March, that the Russian Football Union will appeal its ban by the FIFA and UEFA from the club and international soccer, as well as seeking to overturn the ban that the RFU is also seeking a stay that would also allow its teams compete pending full decision.
Last week, a legal expert says that FIFA and UEFA have a strong case that allowing Russia to participate in international in-club football competitions amounts to a force majeure and the current ban should remain in place. Both soccer governing bodies banned Russia, preventing the men's national team from continuing with their World Cup qualifying campaign and the women's team from taking part in this summer's European Championship. Russian participation in European club competitions will also affected. The sanctions followed the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the widespread global condemnation that followed. Legal expert Anton Duval, a senior researcher at Holland Asser Institute and an expert in sports law, said on Friday that letting Russian teams compete could seriously undermine FIFA and UEFA tournaments because other teams could threaten to pull out. Then we are looking at dispute that will focus on the question whether there is a force majeure and that on the Russian side, there will be arguments coming in about what about all the other wars. Why us basically why this war is particular or specific and constituting force majeure. A line of argument that could be used by the Russian federations to say, well, why not suspend those games? We understand the situation is particular. There is a lot of outrage there, our security risks, for also our teams for participating in those competitions. We would ask, however, to be withdrawn from the competition but to postpone those competitions to a later date, let's say in 2 months or something, and here there could be another type of debate that will be ongoing before the CAS. Whether this is possible, it would not hinder the good organization of the competition, and so on. Obviously, When we look at the Europa League involving Spartak Moscow, it's going to be more difficult because the competition is moving forward. So here, the argument might stick much less. If you look at the World Cup, maybe there is more room for that. So that might be the type of argument that might be advanced. In general, there is a clear, I would say, difference between PR or social sentiments and legal decisions. And I think there is. But I also think that quotes are not totally out of context. They are also embedded in a social situation, and they are aware of the particular situation. At this point, the particular outrage, and that I think then connects as well with the reasoning around force majeure. I mean that in my view, it's not a bad argument, It's not a legally totally flawed argument to ground those suspensions on the issue of force majeure. Because FIFA and UFA are facing an existential threat to their competitions due to this situation. This existential threat is a total boycott. And the only way to deal with those existential threats is indeed at this point to bar Russian competitors from those competitions. So there is a real case that can be built around that. Those provisions linked to a force majeure, and it would be also legally sound. FIFA and UAFA are facing an existential threat to their competitions due to this situation, and this existential threat is a total boycott, he said. And the only way to deal with this existential threat is indeed at this point to bar the Russian competitors from those competitions. So there is a real case that can be built around that, those provisions linked to force majeure, and it would be also legally sound. Duval added that Russia may argue that other countries at war have not been banned in the past, and that postponing World Cup qualifiers or leaving any decisions over these qualifications until as late as possible would be more proportional.
Austria, Finland and Norway each walked away with a gold medal from the Paralympics men's giant slalom competition on Thursday, 10th of March.
Norway's Jesper Pedersen nabbed his third gold of the Beijing Games when he clocked in the fastest time in the men's giant slalom sitting competition. Pedersen came in just over 3 seconds ahead of Italian René De Silvestro, who took silver, with China's Liang Zilo taking bronze. The 22-year-old Norwegian had previously taken home gold medals in the Super G and Super Combined competitions. In the men's giant slalom vision impaired competition, it was Johannes Egner who took the gold home for Austria. The 16-year-old beat out Italy's Giacomo Bertagnoli and Slovakia's Miroslav Hararus, who took silver and bronze respectively, to take home his second gold medal from Beijing after previously having won the downhill. Finland's Santeri Kievere came back to beat Charles Walls of the United States in the men's giant slalom standing competition. Walls had clocked the fastest time in the first leg, but Kievere overtook him in the second leg to take the gold, leaving Walls with the silver. Arthur Bottes of France take home the bronze medal.
World number 2 Novak Djokovic has withdrawn from the BNP Paribas Open in Indian Wells, the tournament announced on Wednesday, in the latest setback for the player due to his refusal to take the COVID-19 vaccine.
The Serb had been automatically listed in the draw for the tournament, but said he knew it was unlikely that he would be able to gain entry into the United States. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has confirmed that regulations won't be changing, so I won't be able to play in the US, Djokovic said in a tweet. Good luck to those playing in these great tournaments, he said, referring also to the Miami Open, which begins later this month. Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov will move into Djokovic's space in the draw ahead of the start of the first round of the Masters 1000 tournament on Thursday. Djokovic was unable to compete at the Australian Open after immigration authorities detained him on January 6th, prompting a legal rollercoaster ride over the country's COVID-19 entry rules that led to the cancellation of his visa later that month. Rafael Nadal went on to win the tournament, and with it, a men's record 21st Grand Slam title, one more than Djokovic and Roger Federer. Djokovic most recently competed in Dubai in February, where Jacques-Jiri Vesely upset him in the quarterfinals. The loss meant he would lose this world #1 ranking to Russian Daniil Medvedev, who claimed his maiden major title in Flushing Meadows in September and is the top seed at Indian Wells. France loosened COVID-19 restrictions this month, with vaccine passports no longer mandatory as of March 14th, opening the door for the 34-year-old Djokovic to defend his French Open title starting in May.
The Major League Baseball and its lockout players reached an agreement on Thursday on a 5-year labour deal that ends the second longest work stoppage in the game's history.
Major League Baseball cancelled.
MLB locked out players last December and had already cancelled the first 2 weeks of the season of 2022, which was scheduled to begin on March 31st. I am genuinely thrilled to be able to say that the Major League Baseball is back and we're going to play 162 games, said MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, who began this year's conference in New York with an apology to fans. I know that the last few months have been difficult. There was a lot of uncertainty at a point in time where there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, he said. Team owners voted to ratify the agreement hours after players approved the new Labour Act, which includes increased minimum salaries, a new pre-ambition bonus, pool reward top young players, and raise in competitive balance tax thresholds. Our union endured the second longest work stoppage in history to achieve significant progress in key areas that will improve not only just the current players' rights and benefits, but those in generations to come. MLB Players Association Executive Director Tony Clark said in a statement, players remained engaged and unfilled beginning to the end, and in the process re-energise our fraternity. Spring training campus will open on Sunday and a full regular season to begin in April 7th. Double headers have been added to the schedule to make up games cancelled after league missed planned March 31 opening day. The final vote from the Executive Subcommittee and 30 players' representatives was 26-12 in favour of the new collective bargaining agreement, ESPN reported. While the deal paves way to the return of America's pastime, bitter acrimony remains between the two sides. The MLBPA's Clarks last week called out the lockout as ultra-economic weapon against athletes. Manfred defended the move on Thursday, calling it the most effective way to reach a new agreement without losing games where the deal was not in place at expiration of previous pact. But he acknowledged there was work to be done and repair the league's relationship when it's off the field. One of the things I'm supposed to do is to promote a good relationship with our players. I've tried to do that. I think I have not been successful in that, he said. He said the league compromised on its proposed 14-team playoffs and made other concessions to the MLB players. I hope that the players will see the effort we made to address their concerns in an agreement as an olive branch, said Manfred.
Begin on March 31.
Harvesting betel nuts is a dangerous job as their trees can grow up to 20 metres higher or even more. With ongoing labour shortages, 50-year-old Gautam Panibat decided to invent a tree climbing scooter and get the job easily and safely.
India is one of the world's biggest producers of betel nuts, also known as areca nuts, with about 1.2 million tons produced between 2020 to 2021. Contributing to this number was Bhatt, who owns an 18-acre farm of towering areca palm trees. Bhatt had worked on his invention since 2014 because of the rising cost of labor and his advancing age. His family was worried about him climbing the tall trees, which could be very slippery during the rainy season. The villagers thought he was mad for trying to invent the scooter, as he fell constantly in the beginning. After 4 years of working with his engineering partner and spending about 4 million rupees, or roughly $52,000 in research and development, he was finally successful in inventing the current tree scooter. The scooter consists of a small German motor, a seat, and a set of wheels. Bhatt is able to scale up a 20-meter tree within 5 seconds. He can harvest betel nuts from more than 300 palm trees compared to the 100 trees per day through the traditional manual climbing method. Bhatt has now sold more than 300 scooters at 62,000 rupees, or roughly $819 each. He said that he feels proud for being able to help people with his invention. His life is now complete. Currently, Bhatt and his engineering partner are working on an advanced scooter to scale coconut trees, which have a thicker girth and curved trunks. He hopes to unveil this new invention soon as well.
Chileans Javier Silva and Jamie Nazar become the first same-sex couple to wed in South America's country history on Thursday, 10th of March. Although Chile allowed same-sex couples to register as civil union agreements and be eligible for some legal benefits in 2015, Chile's Congress only just approved legislation guaranteeing legal rights for the LGBTQ communities this December.
Silva and Nasa had signed a civil union agreement together 3 years ago after being in a relationship for 4 years prior. They wanted to start a family and now have 2 children, one who is 20 months old and another who is just 4 months old. They said that they believed that marriage was an important step for their family, as well as to be recognized by the whole country as equals. They expressed that they are proud to be a part of this historic moment for their conservative country. Silva and Nasa are proud for their children to be recognized as having 2 fathers and excited for their future to see cultural changes and new narratives taking place in Chile. Silva added that without the support from decades of human rights and LGBTQ groups, as well as their families and different institutes, their wedding day could not have happened. Chile's President-elect Gabriel Boric, who took office on Friday, posted a congratulatory message to the couple on his official Twitter account. He wrote, "My congratulations to Jamie and Javier for being the first couple to marry under the new equal marriage law, to continue advancing for Chile with equal rights and freedoms for all people." In recent years, Chile has been making progress in the field of LGBTQ rights, despite a long history of conservative traditions.
And finally, this year marks the 111th International Women's Day, a day which aims to highlight gender equality, recognise women's achievements in history, and commemorate the ongoing march of women's rights. Those in Ukraine this year mostly celebrated International Women's Day from their shelters. However, soldiers in the city of Odessa made sure they make the most of it by bought them flowers to celebrate women in their lives.
Although the city of Odessa is preparing its defenses for the imminent war, soldiers still took the time to buy flowers for friends and family to celebrate International Women's Day. Buying flowers from street vendors, Territorial Defense Forces reservist Yuriv said that he bought flowers for his mother-in-law and wife to congratulate them on March 8th. Because war or no war, women need to be protected, loved, and respected. Another soldier, Dimitriv, bought pink and yellow tulips with his fellow soldiers, adding that women also serve in the army to protect the country and must never be forgotten and deserve to be congratulated. The city of Odessa is home to 1 million people, as well as the Ukrainian naval base, which is the largest seaport in the country. The locals continue to fill bags of sand on the beach to build barriers and undergo weaponry training in order to defend their city from the imminent Russian invasion.
Now let's look at the weather and what you can expect the next few days. Thanks for watching the weekly Roundup here on EAC News Channel. More from EAC News team and Daily Roundup Monday night from 8 p.m. I'll see you then.